Hi, I'm Peter Schweizer, and welcome to the Drilldown, where we relentlessly expose cronyism, corruption, and the abuse of power in Washington, D.C. The host of the program is Eric Eggers. Eric, I'm very excited about today's program. We're going to be talking about a very important topic. We have a guest, but it's not so much a guest as it is kind of a family reunion.
It's a family reunion. What I love about this is there's many different levels of dress code, and Seamus is the one that's classing up the family reunion today because he's also the one that's promoting the book. And so I think, he's the one that is dressed for success. And why shouldn't he be? Because his book is already, I think, a dramatic success. It's exposing things that help explain why society seems to be bending in a direction that doesn't make any sense otherwise. Here we think everyone's crazy. Everyone's not crazy. It's just there's a few key people in charge that are essentially trying to help control your life.
Yeah, and these people have a lot of power because they have a lot of money, and they're names that you're going to be familiar with, but aren't necessarily in elective office, but they're calling the shots for elective office holders. The book is called Controligarchs. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. I even wrote the foreword to it. Seamus is here. Seamus, great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us.
It's always good to be on the Drilldown.
So Seamus is the director of research at GAI. He's done an amazing amount of research over the last decade, some of the biggest stories that we've broken at the Government Accountability Institute. Seamus, now, people are going to be somewhat familiar with the people on the cover. You've got Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, et cetera. So what would you say to somebody who says, well, I kind of know about the World Economic Forum. I kind of know about these rich guys. What's new in this book, and why do you think it's so important that people understand the power that these individuals have?
Yeah, that's right. Most people know all of the people, or at least the 4 or 5 on the cover in this book. But what you don't know is that they have basically seized control of key industries in your life, and they are, like you said, bending them. And as the great Ronald Reagan said, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, that's kind of a frightening view of it. What would you say to somebody who says, look, Bill Gates is just trying to help people. Jeff Bezos is just trying to help people. George Soros, they just want to improve people's lives.
These are nice guys.
They're nice guys. They don't have government power. They just have big charities. So what are you talking about? How can they actually control my life?
Yeah, why do you hate philanthropy so much, Seamus?
I guess you guys were asleep during the pandemic.
Well, no, but I actually think that's a big deal because I think I don't want to assume a knowledge base on behalf of the people that are watching or listening, because the pandemic and what these people are responsible for, and you get into great detail about this, the Great Reset is a term that gets used, but people might not know actually what it means. What did these people have to do with the Great Reset? And does the fact that they did this thing they're calling the Great Reset explain why the pandemic was as impactful as it was?
Yeah, I think you just summed it up perfectly right there. A lot of people have heard about this great reset that Klaus Schwab announced midway through the pandemic in 2020. He gets up in front of the TV cameras and says, the pandemic presents, quote, an opportunity. And I see the need for something called the Great Reset. It's like, what could this Great Reset be? Klaus Schwab defines it as taking over and restarting everything from the economy to the digitalization of everything. That would include digital currency, digital ID, taking over of agriculture. And he says in this speech about, a great reset, we're going to build back better in a greener way. And so a lot of people maybe wondered what does climate change and green energy have to do
with COVID?
With COVID. I think we're starting to see, you have governors like Gavin Newsom, who's announcing that they're going to ban the sale of gas vehicles. You see the banning of gas stoves taking place.
Even in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, they're like, oh, we're going to put Penny Pritzker in charge. And you know what we're going to do is we're going to take their energy grid from a Soviet era one. This is Penny Pritzker's term. And we're going to see if we can leapfrog it into a green energy grid, like as if we're dodging mortar shells, but at the same time, we need to also combat global warming. But you're saying all these things come back from Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Build Back Better plan had been long in the works, even before the pandemic, and these infrastructure bills have been pitched for many years. Now it's kind of repackaged as infrastructure, previously known as the Green New Deal, with this $400 billion plus slush fund for green energy technologies. Some of the things we talk about in the book is the companies who get some of this money are investments of people like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, George Soros. And so the bottom line about the pandemic is the pandemic was this opportunity to profit. The lockdowns were lucrative. Their net worths, people on the cover of this book, skyrocketed through the pandemic. Some of them doubled up their net worths. Meanwhile, the middle and lower classes lost over $1 trillion.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing reset of the financial fortunes of the middle class compared to the oligarchs. No question about that. One of the people you have on the cover of the book is Jeff Bezos. And I'm going to note, if you want to comment on it, the book is selling very, very well in pre-sale. It's actually released the day after we are taping this podcast, and it was the number one mover and shaker, and it had the biggest increase in sales than anything else on the Amazon site. It's been on numerous aspects of the bestseller list, and yet it's curious to me, the price of the book is $32. Amazon always takes books that are bestsellers and discounts them 30 or 40%. They haven't done it thus far for your book. That's curious to me. That's odd to me. And that's something that Amazon controls. So I've got to wonder, is Amazon trying to discourage people from buying your book by keeping the price higher than any other book that's on the bestseller list?
I can't say that with certainty, but there's been a bunch of screwy things with Amazon. I mean, the removal from several lists while all other numbers remained unchanged. The price is an issue. And it wouldn't be the first time that conservative authors have gotten some unfair treatment from Amazon. You've had plenty of books removed from Amazon or sort of censored from the results. You'll probably see results for Controligarchs when you search this. Every other retailer, Barnes and nobody else.
Control. No, I don't see it. No,
you got to scroll. So just keep scrolling, guys.
So let me ask you. He's on the cover of the book. Why would Jeff Bezos not want people to read this book? What is in your book about Jeff Bezos in particular that you think people are going to find interesting?
Well, Jeff Bezos has this Bezos Earth Fund. He capitalized it with $10 billion, which is, one of the largest investments from one of these controligarchs into green energy. And then he's got his personal investment. So it's the same pattern over and over. They use their tax-exempt money to exert climate change type studies and research and funding of projects. And then they also personally invest into the technologies that benefit from climate change policy. So, if you ban the sale of gas vehicles, well, Amazon has invested in Rivian and these, Proterra type companies, these electric bus companies, and that would help Jeff Bezos's and Amazon's bottom line. Bill Gates does the same thing. He invests in electric vehicle companies and then advocates for the ban of gas vehicles. And then Bezos is, like Bill Gates, invested in these fake meat companies as they try to ban or seriously curtail the amount of cattle in the world.
So fake meat's weird. And I think I want to hear more about that, and specifically what kind of fake meat. I guess maybe it's not fake. It's just bad meat.
It's lab meat.
It's not meat. It's not meat.
So it's non-meat stuff. But I think
substitutes.
The larger question is are these guys attempting to shape American and kind of like, I guess, the lives of everyone around the world because they're in a position to make money off of the direction these things are going in, because they think it's genuinely in the best interest of the world, or both? I mean, how do you kind of decide down? Because I know one of the things I love about this book and the incredible work you've done into it is you go deep dive into not just like, here's what's happening, but here's why it's happening. So, and you go into these personal backstories and what's shaped their perspectives. So how much of it's profit? How much of it's control?
Yeah, well, like most people, you've seen the eat the bugs memes and the, stuff like that. And you think, oh, this is crazy. And it's maybe conspiracy or whatever. And then you go and dig through the pages and pages of documents and watch the obscure videos. A lot of them that have been scrubbed off the internet that are detailed in the book. And you think maybe, like, what are these guys, just like sociopaths? Do they want the peasants to just be eating disgusting foods? And then, it's not that. It's there's an element of true believer to them where they think that this may actually save the planet. However, if I can find that lab-grown meats use use more carbon and cause more pollution than cows do, I think that they can figure that out too. So then the only answer that really is left after that is the personal profit. They profit from the investments. Bill Gates only invested into companies like Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods after they had secured patents, which is essentially a 20-year monopoly over that technology or that process of creating these proteins. I mean, the food, I mean, it's kind of remarkable that food is becoming patented. You first saw it with the seeds and with Monsanto, which Gates invested $23 million into Monsanto. They patent the seeds. Nobody else can use those seeds. And then those seeds are resistant to certain types of fertilizer, which he also invests in these new synthetic fertilizers. And then they try to ban the traditional uses, like you saw the Dutch farmers erupting in protest as their traditional fertilizer is banned. It's banned now in Canada, or by 2030 they want to cut it out entirely, and the farmers are kind of getting screwed.
So we want to know just how much these forces are trying to control aspects of global life. They are literally patenting seeds and trying to make it so that you can only use the seeds that they have patents on and the fertilizers they have patents on, where the way we've been growing food, which literally comes naturally from the earth for hundreds of or thousands of years, that's not going to be okay anymore.
Since basically forever, yeah.
Not basically forever, literally since forever.
Literally forever. That's the God complex on steroids you see amongst these guys, where they think that they can create a better food product than the foods we've been eating forever.
But I mean, I think this is the crucially important point, is it gives them control over that. So like if you eliminate meat and move towards bugs or some kind of artificial lab type food, not only do we miss out on those fabulous steaks, but now the actual control of that fake meat is determined by individuals that own the patents on how to produce it. Nobody owns a patent on growing cattle. Anybody can do it. If you've got the land, you've got the ability, but it gives them a level of control over food that did not exist before. And I think that's one of the powerful revelations. Now, on the cover of the book, you've got George Soros, Jeff Bezos, you've got Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, but there's a guy all the way to the left who does not look familiar to a lot of people. Tell us about him and why he is on the cover with all of these guys who are the richest people on the planet.
Yeah, that's Klaus Schwab. He is the founder, chairman, head of the World Economic Forum in Davos. And as at the Government Accountability Institute, of course, we follow the money and followed it to the top, and that is to Davos. So Davos is a kind of quiet, sleepy alpine town where once a year, thousands of people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg fly over there. And you always see the reporting year after year, like, oh, these hypocrites, they're flying in on their private jets. But what most people don't know is what actually takes place in these meetings. And a lot of the coverage that the World Economic Forum puts out, because it's invite only, you can't get in. If you showed up at the doors, they'd probably arrest you. And they'll put out snippets here and there, and they'll put a white paper, and it's always draped in this very sustainable, and we're saving the planet. We're a bunch of good guys out here.
You're welcome, Earth.
Exactly.
Don't worry, we've solved it. The answer is no more cows. Details to follow.
Pretty much. And part of Klaus Schwab's Great Reset, I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier, is this fourth industrial revolution is what he calls it. And it's he's come up with a lot of terms that you didn't know came from him. For example, the metaverse is also known, and there's the Internet of Things. That was a Davos term back in the 90s. And now you see this Internet of Things, and it's everything from your smart washer to your smart home and smart watch. But yeah, under the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, there's this visionary that Klaus Schwab has at the Economic Forum who's really coming up with some of these seemingly crazy ideas. Yuval Noah Harari is his name. He's actually been promoted by everyone from Barack Obama to Mark Zuckerberg to Bill Gates. They all read his books. They've sold 20, 30 million copies worldwide, Sapiens, etc. But if you watch some of these videos of Yuval Noah Harari, he has this very grim outlook for our future where, I mean, I'll just sum it up in more or less a quote from him. People will be in their home connected to VR, on drugs and playing video games.
Yeah.
That's life right there.
Eating the food that they tell us to eat, or because of the seeds they sold us and the fake meat that they own the patents on.
So does Harari think that's a good thing? I mean, when he says that's the
he
future.
speaks rather neutrally on it, but you can't help but notice that he's kind of not necessarily excited about the drugs in the video games, but excited about the AI technological revolution, things like microchips in human bodies. He says the humans of the future will be hackable, and that if you don't get a microchip implant, then you will be left behind. So he may not be speaking positively on it. He may, he does issue some concerns about having hackable humans.
But you've seen The Matrix 3, you know where this ends, so it's
right. But nonetheless, he says there's a new caste system. He says things like there will be, resistance is futile. There will be no peasant revolts. And yeah, he writes neutrally, but also the World Economic Forum follows what he writes, and they set up initiatives about, here's why the new microchip initiative is so important, that we can really help, help with diversity and sustainability if everybody just gets a microchip.
So are these guys on the cover capitalists? People think of them as capitalists, but it seems to me you're arguing there's something more to them. It's not just about guys that want to make money, that create a new widget or new product that's helpful to people. These people have a bigger vision. Bill Gates is about more than Microsoft and, providing, healthcare in the developing world. They have kind of a grand vision of the world. Where does that come from? And why do they feel empowered to impose this on people?
Well, they're a form of capitalists. Klaus Schwab calls it stakeholder capitalism, which, what does that mean?
Right.
Effectively, it is state-run capitalism like they have in China.
And they like China, essentially, right?
Oh, yeah. Klaus Schwab loves China, has been traveling to and from China since the 70s. He and World Economic Forum economists helped China open up their economy and implement the capitalist side of their capitalist hybrid system. But this is not the capitalism you're thinking of. This is really more close to communism. I mean, he calls it stakeholder capitalism, where all the stakeholders have a seat at the table. Guess who doesn't have a seat at the table?
Everybody else.
Everybody else. Right. He actually writes this manifesto in the 70s about stakeholder capitalism, and he lists all the stakeholders. The people are not on there.
Well, it's just crazy because
business leaders, politicians, NGOs.
Well, Peter Schweizer's book, Red Handed, talked about how Silicon Valley leaders have this weird obsession with Mao and with the CCP business model. And if you're in one of those deals where, hey, it would be great if we could just get everybody to buy into this thing that we're trying to sell everyone, the best way to do that is by not giving the people a choice. And that's essentially what they're trying to do. It's like, hey, that's why they love the Chinese model. The Chinese model is top down, right? Hey, you guys will do what we're telling you to do. The problem with that is that's not how America works, and that's not how other countries work. But I think that's where, if you got guys like this that are so established and so powerful, and they can also be connected to the United States government levers, then they can sort of try to force feed it down the line. And that's what I think we see happening at times.
Yeah, there's a phrase, and I'm trying to remember who coined it now. It was describing China, but it comes to mind when you're talking about these controligarchs as well. We all know about Marxism, Leninism, and we know about free markets. And somebody coined the term market Leninism. So you take the market, you take the free market, but the Leninist part is, what is the heart of Leninism? It's, we're going to have a small clique, an elite running everything, the vanguard of the proletariat that's looking out for the interests of everybody else. And that seems to me kind of what you're describing here. So I'm looking at the cover. I've read the book. It's fantastic. But there are people that are in the book that are not on the cover. Elon Musk would be an example. Who else would you want to draw attention to so we don't just judge this book by its cover?
Let's see. Yes, Elon Musk is in there in good detail. And Laurene Powell Jobs, the widow of Steve Jobs. She's kind of like the new Soros, who is funding all of these democracy, election initiatives, news initiatives, counteracting so-called disinformation initiatives.
What could go wrong, right? We're in charge of the elections and the ability to talk about it in the media. We saw that happen actually in 2020. So.
Right. Let's see. BlackRock, Larry Fink. There's a chapter on Follow the Money, and that's BlackRock is obviously the largest asset manager in the world with $10 trillion. I've got Vanguard and State Street, the other asset managers who are combined now topping $22 trillion. So, I mean, larger than the GDP of the United States and China, or close to US, I guess, depending on the Biden inflation metrics. But let's see. I think the really interesting thing about BlackRock is, I mean, you've reported a lot about this in your books, Peter, is the ties to China and how much Larry Fink seems to love China. You've got Schwartzman and the other Wall Street guys who seem to love China. I think there's a really important chapter in there about how all of these guys do love China. So as Chairman Xi comes to visit this week with Silicon Valley leaders, and I guess the president of the United States has to come to him. We see that they love China. The Silicon Valley people love China. You can see the pandemic showed Bill Gates was out there saying they have such a brilliant approach to clamping down on both travel and movement, but also dissent.
But I think why that's a problem is it's one thing for people to like China, but it's another thing for people to then want to fundamentally shift the way we live as Americans. And I think that's actually, during COVID, I think that it couldn't have been in a starker relief about the different political mindset and how that impacted your ability to live your life. And so I think the concern is that if you're attempting to curtail American behavior based on what you're telling us is a problem, but it's not really a problem, it's just something you need us to buy into your solution for. And that's why you can't eat meat. That's why you can't drive a gasoline-powered car. That's why you can't grow types of seeds or send your kids to the school you want to go to. I think that's when it becomes, hey, why is this okay? And it's because people are positioned to make money off of it. And that's my biggest takeaway from your book. And I think you do a great job of exposing why people are so invested in selling us it's a problem because they're so poised to make money off of the solution.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So give us some hope here,
Or don't. I'm not sure if hope sells books, bro. You know what I mean?
But I mean, I think, people look at things, they get frustrated and they think, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. I might as well tune out. And look, maybe the future is we all are sitting in dark basements, with brain chips in our heads, playing video games, totally tuned out. I certainly hope not. But how can people combat this? How can people fight this and fight for the future? Because we've been talking about how the Great Reset occurred during the pandemic. A lot of people would say, well, that's in the past. That's not going to happen again. The point of your book is no, this is sort of the direction that things are going under the guidance of these controligarchs. So give us some hope. How can we fight and resist this? What can people do if they're concerned about their future?
Yeah, on that point, then I see it too, where people say COVID's in the past, blah, blah, blah. No, the pandemic was a blueprint for the future. What you can do is read about all of the things they're up to, spread the word with your friends and family. I mean, one of the concrete steps, if I were to sum it up in 2 words, and it seems so small when you're up against trillions of dollars here, but is jealously guard your wallet and watch what you're spending your money on. Watch who you're giving it to. Cancel the subscriptions to the big tech. Watch what your kids are watching. Don't let them get on like Instagram for kids, which they're trying to work on. And so, yeah, you gotta be paying close attention to every dollar you spend and every thing you and your kids are putting into your head, because mind control is probably the biggest problem.
And not only do they actively want access to our minds and our lives, but we actually now pay them to have it, right? I mean, talk about Jeff Bezos, there's the Amazon Alexa, like Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. The more you use their products, and this gets back to the documentary we did, The Creepy Line, the more they know about us, the easier it is for them to have more control over us. And so I think this is the next iteration of that. So I mean, I think it's absolutely the dominant problem in American society today.
Absolutely. It's a terrific book. It's Controligarchs. I highly recommend it. This is a copy of the book. Please pick one up. And when Seamus talks about mind control, he's not talking about something from an old Star Trek episode. This is talking about how they want to manipulate and steer the way in which you think. That's by the social media you're exposed to. But it also involves this desire on their part to encourage people to actually put chips in their brains. Which to me is, again, you would think that's science fiction from 30 years ago, but it's the reality and the direction that we're going. So, Seamus, great job on the book. Congratulations. Encourage everybody to get a copy of it. Discuss it with your family and friends. Let them know about it. Eric, your final thoughts on where we go from here.
I mean, the chip in the brain sounds crazy, but if you think about it, like I don't even want to hold my phone up to my ear anymore. Like I need the AirPods in the thing. And so I think the convenience is how they sell us on this thing that we otherwise would think was insane. So, I mean, how much further removed are we? We already have most of the time something that's connected to a computer in our ear.
Yeah.
I mean, so
that's Elon Musk's point, by the way. He's like, you're already hooked up to a brain microchip. You just is in your hand.
Yeah.
I like it when it's my point. Elon can get his own material. But yeah. So,
well, and Neuralink just got FDA approval. So human test subjects are underway.
Yeah. And his point, I guess, is get rid of the middleman, get rid of the little earpiece and just go straight to the brain. Truly frightening and important. I encourage everybody to pick up a copy. Well, thank you for joining us for this podcast. As always, we appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. We hope that you've benefited and learned from listening to this podcast. You can find more about the research we do at thedrilldown.com. And of course, this podcast can be found and subscribed to wherever fine podcasts are located. Again, thank you for listening. Until next time.